Good morning. Morena. Good morning. So, who's afraid of the dark? Anyone brave enough to admit that they're a little bit afraid of the dark? One person is, me too. Sometimes the dark can be scary, can't it? If you're honest. Because when it's dark, who's to say that there's not a monster under your bed or a boogeyman in the wardrobe? There could be. But when it's dark, you don't know because you can't see what's there. And when you can't see what's there, well, you don't know. It's dangerous. Maybe something could hurt you. The dark can be scary, but just a little bit of light into a child's dark bedroom can make a big difference, can't it? Just a little light. Just the crack in the door out to the passage lets in enough light to give reassurance, to be able to show enough of the room so that they can have their bearings and be assured that there are no monsters and they can get a peaceful sleep. It's as simple as a little light that you turn on and it makes a big difference. And I'm certainly glad that I live in this time in history because access to light is so easy. If I'm walking back to the car, say at night on my own, I'm probably going to take out my phone and put the torch on and use that to help make me better aware of my surroundings. That light is going to help to keep me safe because the dark can be dangerous. You know, for people in the Bible, it wasn't so easy to have light. They couldn't just flick out the phone, flick a switch and have light. For the people in the Bible, the darkness was something to be feared. It was scary and it was dangerous. And the presumption was that the people who were out after dark were people who were up to no good. If you lived in ancient times and you were out working in the field during the day, you were travelling from one place to another place, as the sun began to set in the sky, you hurried up your speed and you got back to your home. You got back to your city because as soon as night fell, that city would be locked up for the night. And you wanted to be safe inside the city, not outside the city. And even within your home, you might have had a bit of a candle or a lamp to see you right as you had your dinner. But most families probably didn't have the resources to be able to keep the place lit up all night unless there was a really good reason for that. They did not have easy access to light like we do. Now, as we continue in this series about light, I actually want to talk about darkness today. Because you see, I think that in order to really appreciate how good and important the light is, we have to appreciate how scary and dangerous the dark is. And that is something that people in the ancient world had a far greater appreciation of than what we do today. So today we're going to look at two passages that think about darkness. And it's not just ordinary darkness. Ordinary darkness is a bit scary. And both of these passages, there's an extra dimension to the darkness that is downright terrifying. So, the first of those is in the book of Exodus. It's the second book in the Bible, and it's the book that tells us the story of Moses being called by God to go before Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, to ask that God's people be let go. So the Hebrew people were at that time slaves in Egypt, and Moses goes before Pharaoh and says, God says, my people need to go. And Pharaoh quite liked having the Hebrews there. There's about 2 million of them probably. They're his slave population. They do all his work for nothing. So he said, I don't think so. And God started sending some plagues. He needed to get the message through to Pharaoh. Pharaoh was a pretty stubborn man. And so God sent a plague of flies, and there's frogs, and there's gnats, and locusts, and all kinds of other, nasty, horrible things. And each plague gets more intense than the one before it. But Pharaoh is stubborn, and he's not going to let God's people go. And so we come up to the 9th plague. And God says to Pharaoh, God says to Moses, you need to stretch your hand out and I'm going to bring darkness over that whole land of Egypt. Darkness that can be felt. Ooh, what does darkness feel like? And so that's what happened. For 3 days, there is darkness over the whole land of Egypt. And it is so dark, you can't even see anybody else. And you certainly can't leave your home and go travelling because that would be incredibly dangerous. darkness that can be felt. This is no normal darkness. There's something supernatural going on here, and there's something deeply symbolic going on here. God is sending a message to Pharaoh. But what does it feel like to feel darkness? I imagine the hairs on the back of your neck might stand up. I imagine there'd just be like an overwhelming feeling of dread and terror in the air. What a horrible thing to not only experience darkness, but feel it. Have you ever been in complete darkness? If you live in a city, it's actually very hard to have complete darkness. But maybe you've been caving and you've turned the light off and it was so dark you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. Have you been in an experience like that? Was it scary? Weird? Disorientating? It was that dark. It was that dark. And so there's this physical darkness that's going on here and the inconvenience and the worry that must have come from that. But there's a symbolic darkness that's going on because you see the most powerful god in the Egyptian gods was Ra, the sun god. And Ra was the most powerful. He ruled the sky and the earth and the underworld. Ra was the life force, giving life to everything. And here, Pharaoh is being sent a very clear message. Your God Ra, he has nothing on the Hebrew God. The Hebrew God makes Ra completely useless. So Pharaoh, you should probably listen to God then, shouldn't you? But he still didn't. He's a stubborn man. And he still refused to let God's people go. And so God sent a final plague, the death of the firstborn. And in this plague, this is where the Hebrew families were kept safe by the blood of a sacrificed animal that was put over their doorframe. But death came into every other household in Egypt that night, including Pharaoh's own family. Pharaoh lost his own son, his oldest child, and at that point he thought he would listen to God and he would let God's people go. At that point, the Hebrew people went from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light. They went from a place where they didn't have a real identity of their own. They were just slave people who belonged to someone else. They went from that to having a new identity as the people of God. They went to being people who had a sense of their place in the world. These once slaves entered into a special relationship with God. He called them into a relationship. And as part of that relationship, God asked them to live in a certain way. A way that would reflect who he was to the people who looked at them. They were to live in a way that was different to all the people around them. They were to be God's window display to the world. Isaiah puts it like this. God said to them that he would make them a light for the Gentiles. They would be like a lighthouse, beaming out hope and security and purpose and identity to all of those who would look at them. In another place in Isaiah, he says something else about the light. He predicts a light that is going to come. And this is what he says. He describes it like this, that the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. And on those living in the valley of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. And right at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, Matthew, Luke, and John all make it very clear that they understand Jesus is this light. Jesus is the light who Isaiah had prophesied, who has come into this dark world. And so Jesus, the light of the world, came into the world and he lived amongst us. And he taught people, and he healed people, and he loved people, and he upset people, and he gave people hope and security and purpose and place, and gave them a sense of who they were and how they fitted into the world. And he did that for a woman named Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was possessed by 7 demons. How dark must that have been? But Jesus brought light into her world. He brought her healing and freedom and wholeness and a sense of identity, and she found her place in the world, and her place was to be close to Jesus. She became part of that inner circle of Jesus to the point that when Jesus was hanging on the cross, she was one of a small group of women who were watching from a distance as those unbelievable events unfolded. She was there when the sky went dark. Supernatural darkness. It was midday. Now, for 3 hours, not 3 days like in Exodus, but for 3 hours, a supernatural darkness descended. The sky was dark. The sun stopped shining. I wonder if this was darkness that could be felt. I imagine it was. But again, this is more than just the darkness. There is something supernatural here going on, and there is something deeply symbolic happening here. Jesus, the light of the world, was going out. Jesus, the light of the world, was having all the dark sin of everyone in the world heaped on top of him. And Jesus, the light of the world, felt lost and abandoned and alone. For the first time in his life, he felt separated from God, his Father. It was truly a dark moment. And how dark it must have felt for Mary Magdalene. He'd given her hope and purpose. She had found herself again. She had believed what he said, and now he was dead. What was she going to do? How disappointed she must have felt. How let down she must have felt. Was he just a con artist all the time? Had he deceived her and she had bought into the lie? She was lost. She was in a dark place. But here's the interesting thing. However it was that she was feeling at that time, we find that a couple of days after Jesus' death, early in the morning, while it was still dark, she went to the tomb. What was she thinking? That was a dangerous thing to do, to be travelling in the dark, a woman in that part of the world. Like, did she have a light? Did she go by herself? We don't know what she was thinking. But somehow in the darkness, in her dark time, she got up, she took a risk, she went out, and you know what happened? She met the risen Jesus. In her darkness, she found the light. Can you relate to what Mary Magdalene might have been feeling? I wonder if you've been through dark times and you felt like people have let you down, disappointed you, abandoned you. Maybe you felt trapped and enslaved by something. Maybe you felt lost and directionless. A few years ago, I wasn't in a great space. Some stuff had happened and people had let me down and things hadn't turned out like I thought they were going to turn out. And there was a particular Sunday that I wasn't going to come to church. I was going to take my grandmother for a cup of coffee up the road. So I decided to do that. I walked, she's about a block from our house is her rest home, so I went and I picked up my grandma. When I say picked her up, I put her in the wheelchair because we're going to just walk up the road to the cafe. And as we walked, I could hear that there was music happening at the school just across the road. So we went over. Grandma wanted to know what the music was. And we could see that it was a church rehearsing. They were about to start their service, and Grandma says, "We're going to go to church." And I would have much rather had a cup of coffee, but when your grandmother says you've got to go to church, you've got to go to church. So we went, and that pastor told a story that I needed to hear, and I want to tell it to you today. The story was about a British fur trader by the name of John Mears. And in 1788, he set off along the coast of America looking for fame and fortune. He'd been told that if he could find the mouth of the Columbus River and sail up that river, there was gold up there and he would be a wealthy man. And he really liked the thought of that. And so he'd got his directions and he got all prepared and he was excited and full of hope and promise this was going to change his life. And he headed looking for the river, the mouth of the river, and he could not find it. You see, it was so dark and foggy that he just couldn't find the mouth of the river. And they sailed up and down and they explored, and they kept checking the ocean floor to see what it was doing, and it kept getting shallower. And he thought, this isn't the mouth of the river, this is a bay. We're going to run aground here. That's what they thought from the conditions, and so they gave up. And he left and he went home disappointed, quite devastated really. He'd been lied to. This wasn't the case. Whoever told him to go there simply didn't know what they were talking about. And so he named that bay, that he thought was a bay, Deception Bay. And he named the Cape Disappointment. That was how he felt. He wasn't very happy. Fair enough. But the thing is, the mouth of the river was there, just couldn't see it. You see, the conditions were so bad. Apparently, that stretch of water is one of the foggiest places in the world. It is an incredibly dangerous place to sail. So dangerous, it's become called the graveyard of the Pacific, because we know of 2,000 ships that have been shipwrecked in that spot. See, when you can't see where you're going, it can be dangerous, can't it? But something happened in 1856 to change that. They built a lighthouse on the Cape of Disappointment. That's the very lighthouse that was built. That's been our background picture. That lighthouse is sitting on the Cape of Disappointment. That lighthouse is at the head of Deception Bay. Now, it's not enough to light up the whole sky. It's only a little bit of light. But it was enough to give hope to a lost sailor. It was enough to help keep them safe. It was enough to give them their bearings so that they would know where they were in the world and that they could find their way. And that Sunday morning, I needed to know that. I needed to know that there was a lighthouse in my place of disappointment, in my place of deception. I needed hope, and I needed to know where I was. Do you need to know that? There's a lighthouse in your place of disappointment. There's a lighthouse in that place that you've been deceived. There's a lighthouse in the land where you feel you've been enslaved. There's a lighthouse in that thing that you feel stuck in and powerless to move yourself out of. There's a lighthouse. In your darkness, there's a lighthouse. Look to the lighthouse. There is hope and safety in the lighthouse. And for those of you this morning that aren't in the dark, you're already looking at the lighthouse. That is brilliant, but this message is for you too, because you need to be the lighthouse. Because the world is dark and there are people in your circle and they are lonely and lost and depressed and addicted and they don't know who they are and they don't know how they fit into this world, and the only light of God that they're going to see is the light that shines through you. You are God's window display. You are a light to the nations. You are a lighthouse. Will you be the lighthouse? Will you look to the lighthouse? We're going to sing a song that's Light of the World. And as we do, I've got some candles. They're just little candles, and there's a whole lot. Can you see those places down there and over there? And I invite you, as we sing, to come and take a candle and keep it in your pocket of the jacket that you wear all the time, or put it somewhere where you're going to see it. And every time you notice it, remember you've got to be the lighthouse and you've got to look to the lighthouse. And so as we sing, I invite you to get up and have some movement around here. And if you feel like you would like prayer, then there is this mercy seat you can come and kneel at, or we're going to have the prayer team please to come over to the corner if you would like to pray with somebody. Maybe you are in a dark time. Maybe you know of others in a dark time and it would be helpful to bring your concerns for them to God in prayer. Maybe you didn't even mean to be at church this morning, but somehow God got you here. And however it is that you're here, you're meant to be here. And God has something to say to you. So don't be stubborn like Pharaoh. Don't let God have to really struggle to get your attention. Give him your attention. Be like Mary Magdalene, who even in the darkness took a risk, went out and met Jesus.